Hello, my name's Ed. I'm a junior doctor in the UK, and I come to you with some cautious optimism about what we're seeing on the ground in the hospital at the moment. The number of people coming in with COVID-19 has significantly dropped, which is just amazing news. And obviously that will then start rippling through the rest of the hospital. So, in the emergency department, we just see patients on the front door, but clearly there's still going to be patients on the medical wards and patients on the ICU that are still struggling with this illness. But because we're seeing less through the front door, hopefully we're going to start seeing the benefits in those healthcare settings too. And because of that, the department is moving more to a normal emergency department layout. So before we had lots of surge planning because of COVID-19, and that's slowly being rolled back. So these are things like the pediatric emergency department was moved, and that area became a walk-in area for people with COVID-19. That's been removed back. So we now have our pediatric emergency department back, and the red zone has decreased in size. So that's the area where people have high risk for COVID-19, or we know they have COVID-19 from a recent diagnosis. And that has changed in size throughout the pandemic, but that won't for a long time disappear, because obviously respiratory illnesses are common in the emergency department anyway. And so while this illness is still around, we're still going to need an area like that. So if someone comes in with a pneumonia or something like heart failure, we can't at the time rule out COVID-19, so we'll have to treat it like that. So maybe there'll be some kind of red zone for a long while. We'll wait to see how long that lasts. So in many ways, this is a roll back to normality, but it's going to be a long time before some of the other bigger changes, like having a red zone and having to wear PPE with every patient we see, and having to social distance, and things like our waiting room being social distance. Those kind of changes are going to be there for a long while. And obviously it's having an impact on patients as well. They're having to wear masks, and relatives are still having restrictions on who can visit. But on the whole, this is definitely going in the right direction, and you might think this is a time to jump up and down and celebrate. But for me, it kind of feels like when you've finished a big exam. That's my point of reference. Having gone to medical school and sat many an exam, afterwards you don't feel like leaping up and down for joy. It's very much a kind of more of a relief that we're ending up here. I say that, but the emergency department anyway is a very busy place, and actually the last few shifts I've had have been just incredibly busy, but not with COVID-19, just with general things that come into the emergency department. So, there's not that time to kind of get the breath back in that way. But certainly it does feel like we are going in the right direction. I also feel as well, as a summary, looking back on this whole year, it has been a year now. It's kind of like a car crash in slow motion, in a sense that what we've just experienced is that real acute trauma of the actual crash, the everything flying everywhere, the kind of unsure what's going to happen, the chaos drawn out over a whole year. And now we're perhaps going to see the more sinister, chronic impacts that this is going to have on the health service. So we're already seeing, I think, mental health is taking a big hit. We're seeing all those, elective work that I know a lot of the outpatient appointments have been done virtually, but we can't quite have matched what we could have done face to face, and lots of elective surgeries and things like that are going to need to start catching up. And there's no getting away from the financial implications of everything we've gone through. I am optimistic that this is the beginning of the end. It's probably going to be. Maybe that comment will come back to haunt me. But I do believe the government's roadmap out of this. But I understand if you think we've had these lockdowns before, and after a period of time we just end up in lockdown again. I kind of get that. So that's why I say we've got to be cautiously optimistic. But I think this time what has changed the tide is the vaccines. And that was always going to be the game changer if we had successful vaccines, which we have. And I think that's one thing the UK has done amazingly well. I've been critical of lots of things, that the government response to this, but the vaccine has been unbelievable. So just looking here, 23 million people have had the first vaccine. So around about a third of people in the UK, and we know that it does offer some protection, not as much as having both doses, but still I think the strategy of having a single dose, although controversial, is proving to be a good one. So that's around about a third of the UK population has some immunity from that. And also, don't forget, lots of people have had the illness as well, so therefore they'll have some immunity. So those factors, combined with the roadmap of opening things up every 5 weeks and continually monitoring the impacts of things opening up, is the best strategy. And it does kind of beg the question of, why didn't we have a kind of strategy like this from the very beginning? I'm not saying the vaccine thing, because obviously that's only really come into force, but when the virus was first around, I'm pretty sure we should have had a pandemic strategy to say we need to open things up and review every 5 weeks. If certain things are hit, we need to lock down. But it just seemed to be running on pure optimism before, in terms of, opening things up over Christmas. Anyway, at least now we have something that I feel like we can be a little bit more confident in. Not that I'm some public health expert, it's purely my very junior doctor opinion on it. And on the flip side, you may say, well, if you're vaccinated, why shouldn't you just be allowed to do whatever you want, open things up for those people? Well, you kind of need both things, right? So say the vaccine is, I'm just going to kind of pick a number, but say 90% effective at stopping serious illness. Well, if you go out into a community that has lots of virus still around, well, you still have a chance of getting it, and therefore you still have this chance of having a severe illness to it. So therefore you also need to reduce the risk of actually getting the virus in the first place, and the only way to do that is with the lockdown. Clearly there will come a point there where numbers are low in the community and lots of people are vaccinated, but there'll still be a risk to people catching it. But that's just life, we have lots of illnesses that we can catch out in the community, but we don't just shut down everything. So I think as soon as the numbers are kind of similar to other viral illnesses or other infections, that's when we'll start seeing a real return to normal. So that's why we still need to take it seriously. And there are still risks along the way. I mean, the biggest one that probably have entered into all your minds, because we've seen it happen already, is further mutations in the virus that may escape the vaccine. But I think with the vaccine technology we have, bringing a vaccine may even be slightly quicker this time. And certainly what we know at the moment is the vaccines are effective against the major strains in the UK. And although throughout this whole vlog I've been very UK centric, we have to think about the whole world as well, because not just the cost on human life, but actually in terms of the pandemic going on longer than it should, we need to make sure that vaccine is distributed fairly, because the worst thing you want is an area where the virus is particularly rampant, because a large number of infections means a large number of virus replications, which means a large number of possibility of mutations, which could then spread to other parts of the world. One of the big stories in the UK at the moment, and I touched on it when I said one of the chronic impacts of the pandemic is the idea of finances, was the unveiling of the pay rise for NHS staff. The proposal being a 1% pay rise for people that work in the NHS. And there's been a lot of attention on the NHS throughout this whole pandemic, for obvious reasons. And I say attention, I mean appreciation. I've never felt so appreciated as a doctor. Both on a national level, and I know this happened in many places across the world, with a kind of clap for carers. And when that first started happening, when I saw the images and hearing people tell me they did a clap and showing me videos and things, it really did move me. And the first time it happened, I was on shift actually, and it will always stick in my memory, because it was this huge kind of juxtaposition of what we're seeing and then what we're feeling on the outside, which was really amazing. And I know I've talked on the channel before that actually lots of people later on, the clap for carers became a bit political, I think, and many people thought, well, okay, it's one thing demonstrating it, but then the actions need to follow. We need to have the PPE, we need to feel like we're rewarded financially. And I think the pay rise is people's fears about that kind of attitude, in terms of showing your appreciation, but then it not really being followed through. And it's difficult as well, because I think individually people doing the clap for carers came from a really good place. It's just the powers that be don't then follow through on what the people want. They have other interests. It's worth noting at this point as well, individually when I see patients, I've always found they've been very appreciative of the work of the NHS. But we have to recognise that the pandemic is going to have massive financial repercussions. So I understand that the 1% pay rise is all the government, or what should I say, us as taxpayers, can afford. I totally get that. I believe that there's not enough money to do a pay rise. And let's not forget as well, lots of other key workers are having a pay freeze. And with inflation, this is effectively a pay cut for everyone. It's just not a pay cut as much for people in the healthcare setting. But then you have to look at, well, where is the money then? And, you know, as a wider society thing, look at who's got rich off the pandemic. The PPE contracts seemed pretty mad, the amount of money that got dished out without due diligence. And the test and trace system over the next couple of years costing us £37 billion. That kind of money is just outrageous. I mean, I just tried to type in that number in my phone, on my iPhone, and I couldn't even write that number in the calculator. And I know that hasn't all been spent so far. I think they've spent around about half of that money, so 20 billion. And we're so bad at dealing with huge numbers like that. I think we have around 300,000 nurses in the UK. The total spending of the test and trace could give every single nurse 100 grand. That is just insane money. I'm not for 1 minute saying that we don't need an effective test and trace system. And my experience of using it has been pretty positive actually, not in terms of test results, in terms of actually going there. When I've needed a test, people have been extremely nice there, extremely efficient there. The issue is it was just way too expensive and way too late as well. The promises we had when it would start getting up and running just were massively delayed. And our own Public Accounts Committee said that they were treating the taxpayer like an ATM. So when even the MPs are saying it's too expensive, it does make you question it. I think this pandemic has taught us the value of a key worker. I mean, it says it in its name, but to me, the definition should probably be changed to someone that doesn't get paid enough for what they contribute. And society, we tend to celebrate almost the opposite of that. You know, celebrities or people that, you know, make lots of money regardless of actually how they've made the money. And I think one of the dangers of some of the coverage we've had as healthcare professionals is picturing us as heroes or angels and using this very sanctimonious language to describe what we do. And within that, often people then think there's some kind of sacrifice there, that we have to give more of ourselves and earn less money. Surely you want to reward people to go into professions that do good. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. So there you go, just my thoughts on this weekend. I hope you're all well and I hope you're taking care of yourselves, because you can do anything, I think, for a few weeks, a few months, but after a year, things can be a real grind, aren't they? So just make sure you're taking care of yourselves and people around you. We are really doing well. We're going in the right direction, so we just need to keep on going. So on that note, have a lovely weekend, have a super week, and I'll see you soon.